Good morning. Oh, let's do better. Good morning. Much better. Thank you very much. See, there really are lots of you out here. You know, I was talking backstage to Peter before the morning started, and Peter said that he was going to be the boring guy. And I thought that those statistics were incredibly impressive around support. I was thrilled to see some of that stuff because I've been dealing with customer support for forever, actually, I guess. So my job today is to talk about release management. They've given me 30 minutes, so obviously I will finish in 15 and we won't have much to do at the end, right? Okay. So my belief is that release management, if you were to boil it all down, the real goal of release management, at least in ITIL, is do no harm. So that's the medical oath, right? Before you do surgery, you're not supposed to do any harm. You're not supposed to mess me up in order to fix me, right? You're not supposed to screw up my body in order to make something better. You're not supposed to screw up my infrastructure in order to release your fancy app, otherwise known as a business solution. But that's not always what happens. So, in the old days, it was better. It was easier. IT was cleaner, if you will. We had projects like, let's upgrade to Office 97. That was it. That was the project, right? I mean, that was perfect. Let's dump the Macs and go to PCs with Windows 95 on them, or Windows 98. It was fun. It was nice. It was geeky. It was technical. We liked it in IT. Let's maybe make a standard. That's an idea. Let's standardize the hardware. Gosh, that'd be so much fun. That'd be so great. Geeks. I'm a geek. I love geeks. The business side was also simpler. Okay. Let's complete years of research and documentation for the critical regulatory filing so that we can be in compliance to something that is specific to our industry. Nothing general. No general compliance. No SOX. None of that junk. Let's make sure the documents have integrity and are actually accurate, and that, you know, even though there are thousands of them, and of course they're still on paper, let's make sure we file. Life is good. Life was simple. The goal of IT, let's get that deadline. Let's push that sucker out. But the users aren't happy. Screw them. Pretty much. And if you've been in IT for any length of time, we refer to that as the good old days. We can't do that anymore. We used to do it. We did it right up till December 31st, 1999. God, that was a great year. 1999. It's like our best year ever. I mean, we could buy anything. Budgets weren't there. There were no budgets. You know, you put Subway sandwiches on a PO and said Y2K, and man, bam, you'd get them. Or router infrastructure. I need new routers. Yeah, go for it. There are no dates in routers. 0 dates in routers, okay? Routers remember things for like 1 second. That's all they remember. They have no idea what a date is. And we bought all new routers. Look at Cisco's stock. It tanked right after Y2K. It was ridiculous because we all bought routers. Okay? Anyway. So you all remember, some of you, I see some gray hair out there. Some of you might be as old as I am. Remember that magic moment? You were all there, I'm sure, the 1999, December 31st. It was a New Year's Eve party. And we were all there along with senior management, which was interesting. Since senior management we had to send them directions on how to get to the data center. Anyway, so senior management was there and the clock ticked down. Lights are still on. Somebody go flush a toilet. Okay, basic stuff working. Let's, hey, process a fake mortgage or something. See if you can get it to go like 30 years. And yeah, let's see what happens. That's kind of what we did. And then senior management, who was waiting there with bated breath, you know, we're all high-fiving, we're popping champagne in the data center. Woo, that's cool. Right? About 30 minutes in, senior management's looking at each other going, so what exactly did we spend all that money on? Why the hell are we here? What is this? This is stupid. Anyway, Y2K was the only time my wife, and I mean, I've talked about this crap for, 30 years. Anyway, so IT stuff. And she's the only time in our entire marriage she went, okay, stop. Sit down. What did I do? I started running through. Yeah. I said, she went, I want to know, is anything going to happen? I went, no. Well, what's all this stuff about then? I said, nothing, don't worry about it, everything's fine. Okay, anyway, we moved on, life was good. Anyway, it was the only time she cared about anything I've ever said. It's the only time she cared. It was really quite funny. Okay, the business goal was much simpler too. It was, let's meet that filing deadline, be first to market with $1 billion project. Okay, product. But then somebody said, some voice in the wilderness spoke up and said, hey, wait a minute. I know we want to deliver the new functionality and be real exciting, but shouldn't we make sure that we protect the integrity of the existing services as well? Nah. We'd rather put it in, then back it out, and put it in, then back it out, put it in, then back. It's kind of an employment guarantee for IT folks. So, and then, of course, once again, on Y2K, what happened was we could no longer employ FUD. We could no longer use fear, uncertainty, and doubt as the key motivation in IT budgets. We could no longer scare the crap. You remember the geeks who would come in for the training program? I don't mean the technical training program. I mean the how to get the PO signed training program. Okay, so the geek would come in and we'd say, now here's the key. I know that others may have said to you, don't use technical language when the business is here. Okay, that doesn't work when we're signing the PO. Okay, so the key here is to use as many possible acronyms as you can. All right? Then scare the living crap out of them that if the acronym doesn't happen, then more acronyms will happen. Okay? And you will know that you are successful if the glaze begins to appear in their eye. But do not stop at that moment. Go for the kill. Keep acronyming until they are completely, totally glazed. And once completely glazed, shove the PO across the table and say, press hard, the 7th copy is yours. Where are we now? Incident management. You just heard a lot about incident management from Peter. Incident management, the goal from ITIL is get them up and running as quickly as possible. Restore normal service operation as quickly as possible. Get them back up. Get them back up. Okay? And this is at the expense of actually fixing it. That's important for you to know, all right? Because what Peter was talking about actually was two things inside ITIL. One was incident management, get you back up and running. And two was problem management, fix it for real and never have it happen again so you won't have to call. Okay? So we're there. We're at incident management. We're pretty good. Change management, perhaps the most important process in all of IT. It's called control. Control the life cycle of changes, all changes. All changes? Are you talking about every change? Yeah, every change. Wait a second, do you know how many changes? We have a lot of changes. All changes. But is there a way to make that kind of like more palatable, less administrative and awful? Yeah, there is. You have to put together a real mature change management process. And that means there are big, medium, and large, medium, small changes, large, medium, small impact. I know which ones are which. I focus on the ones that have the most impact. I don't spend a lot of time on the ones that don't have a lot of impact. That's how it works. Well, but you see, we have an infrastructure organization. See, our organization is different than everybody else's. Really? Yes, we have infrastructure over here, which is the geeks and everything else. And then over here, we have the development organization, and they really don't talk a lot to each other at all. So infrastructure seems to have their own change process, and they release things and change things on a specific schedule, and development seems to do whatever they want, whenever they want. So I think of change management like, I flew in last night, so I think of change management like there is a time in your life. There are times when the right thing to do is to have a single point of control. That's the right thing. I mean, I'm from the 60s, man, you know. If you lived in the 60s and you lived well, you don't remember a thing. I'm the free love kind of guy, you know, whatever makes you happy. Not with change management, I'm not. With change management, it's the way it works is this, a single point of control. My best analogy is called the airport. They have something there. They call it the control tower. Everybody has to ask for permission to do crap. Can I back away from the gate? Sure. Can I go on the tarmac? Sure. Can I go on the taxiway? Sure. Can I get on the runway? Sure. Can I take off? Sure. Hold it. Okay now. Right? We get in line, right? We all get in line to take off. We don't just grab the pilots don't go, ooh, let me grab my $100 million toy and race to the end. I'll beat you. That's not what they do. Why do they do this? Why do they have such absolute control? One, safety. I like that. I really like the fact that I won't die as much if they have good control. Number two, performance. They can take more flights off and land more planes if they know where they are and they know what's coming in and coming out and who's doing what and where. Total makes sense. So that means that when the development group says, we're on our own change schedule, or, let me bring up another one, the SAP group, oh God, oh, the arrogant, Okay, you know what SAP does? I mean, it's a great big software company. I know they're very successful, and they have a goal which makes total sense: sell more software. And when they sell the software, they implement the software. And when they implement the software, they want it to be successful. Life is good. Then, because they want to leave and go sell another one and do this again. So ITIL is over here, and ITIL says, change the culture of the organization. Really, make it a new service-focused, service-oriented organization. I agree completely. It's just hard. So what does SAP do? They go around your IT department. Have anybody been through this? And they tap people on the shoulder. Hey, come with me. Oh, come with me. You look smart. Come with me. And they assemble this little subgroup of IT, otherwise known as the SAP group, the SAP little private IT group. They teach them SAP processes, ITIL. They teach them and they say, this is the way it has to be because SAP can't go down, so you got to do this. Right? So they do this little sub-ITIL thing, and then they say, go on and do whatever you want over here because the rest of them will take years to catch up. Ridiculous. Anyway, change management. Okay, yeah, let's see, what's next? Configuration management. So, the idea in configuration management is simple. Could you please just jot all this down? What do you mean? All of it. All the infrastructure? Yeah, there's a good start. Just write down your entire infrastructure, please. And by the way, keep it up to date on a daily basis because we certainly don't want it to be lack integrity. We want it to be, strong and good. So do that. Okay, so configuration management, also difficult. Almost always requires a tool, some sort of inventory management tool, some sort of discovery tool, all those types of things, because otherwise we're never it's too massive a task. So we're gonna upload or federate all sorts of data sources into a configuration management database or configuration management system. Now, to make all this happen, we've got project management. Project management came about basically in World War II, truthfully, to figure out how to make ships, how to make them really fast. At the end, they were pumping out a ship a day, which is pretty amazing. But then we got a PMO, Project Management Office. So that was different. Why? Well, because you had a project, and 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 nobody really was trying to figure out whether your project was different than your project. So we had all these projects kind of colliding, duplicating, and needing the exact same resources. So we needed a Project Management Office, which makes sense as we move forward. And it also makes sense when we get started with the release management, because project management, when you get right down to it, is the kind of tied to release management. And then when we deal with systems, we have the system development lifecycle, SDLC, and basically we have a life cycle with almost everything in IT. Is there anything in IT that we don't start, use, and kill? I mean, basically that's what we do. Sometimes that's 6 months, sometimes it's 6 years, and sometimes it's decades. Sometimes it's COBOL.
Going away tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Okay, so what's release management? The goal, the ITIL definition: plan, schedule, control the build, test, and deployment of releases and deliver the new functionality while protecting the integrity of existing services. In other words, the full enchilada. Do the new stuff, don't screw up the old stuff. Now, you've been there long enough. You understand that it's possible to screw up the old stuff. So in the demand, plan, build, run, maybe there's one more on there, govern, demand, plan, build, run. We're talking about plan and build. So what's a release, actually? Well, it's lots of pieces, and sometimes it's hardware, sometimes it's software. Usually there's some software. There hopefully is some documentation. There might be new processes involved in a release. There might be processes to do the release management process. It might be that we're actually changing processes to get the release to run, to make the release work. So we might have processes and procedures to pull that off. Okay, there's also some components, licenses, normal stuff. All right, and what I often find is when someone asks me what a release is, I say it's a collection of changes. In other words, when you look at changes, when you do change management, often a change is not a change. Often a change is really a bunch of changes that have to be done in a certain way, in a certain order, at a certain time. So in other words, it's really this whole list of changes, only it's listed as a change. And then this one has to go in, and then that machine has to be rebooted, and we test it. Then this one goes in because it needs the machine to be on the upper upgrade before the next one goes in, so that that's available when this goes in. Right? You understand my idea? Normal stuff. So that, in the end, is a release. It's a parent-child relationship of changes. So the parent is the release. The child, all the other pieces that have to go in, whether they're hardware, software, processes, documentation, whatever. Often this becomes a project because it's big. It doesn't have to be a project, but if it's big enough and involves enough parties and enough moving parts and has the potential to impact things, then often it's a project. The idea behind it is I build it once and I can deploy it anytime I want. One of the easy examples is things like, okay, I'm sure we've all gone through our Windows 7 upgrade, and I know you're avoiding Windows 8. That's fine. It's okay. We all are. Just like Vista. Just like every even-numbered copy of Windows we've ever looked at. All right, so Vista was Windows 6. Okay, so the idea is build it once. So if I were to build a Windows 7 upgrade, I would basically, do all the stuff I needed to do, re-image the machines, test a small group, probably the IT department, and see how it worked. And then if that worked, then I'd do another small group. And then if that worked, I'd be done with the release part of it, and now it's just a copy, basically. In other words, I've done the new part, I've done the testing, life is good. Release readiness is the responsibility of the release management process. We will refer to this human being as the release manager, someone in the role of release manager. This is the person who's actually coordinating the release management process. Not necessarily the geeky parts. They're not actually typing and doing geeky things and changing servers and stuff. They're not doing that. They're coordinating to make sure the release is going to actually work. So when we talk about a no-go decision, we need to, what's involved in that? Should we go forward? Okay, what's involved? Well, is the technology ready? Whose responsibility is that? Release management. Are the users ready? Is the user environment ready? Whose responsibility is that? Release management. Are the tech support people ready for the new release? Or is it like so many times, hey, we're going in with this tomorrow, here's the CD. Good luck. Whose responsibility is support? Release management. Whose responsibility is it to know that 6 different servers have to be brought up to a new patch level in order for the technical part of the release to go forward? Well, that would probably be development. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that those 6 servers are up to that new patch level? Release management. Who generates the RFCs so that those 6 servers get to that new patch level? Release management. Who's responsible for measuring the success, establishing the criteria? Release management. Who's responsible for QA testing and establishing the criteria for QA? Release management. Release management is a huge role that in many IT departments, even today, doesn't even exist. It's not a tool. I mean, Serena has a wonderful tool. That's fine. But release management is a process and a role, and we've ignored it for decades. It's really kind of amazing how we've gotten along as we have. It's something that I'm proud to say that the V3 version of ITIL, which came out in about 2007, finally got release management right after only 2 other tries of basically getting it wrong. And it was, and that version is great and is a great guideline for folks like you to use. Earlier versions were just a joke. Okay, whose responsibility is it to develop a backup plan to test these things? All release management. Do they actually do it? No, but they coordinate it, make sure it happens, start checking them off, checking them off, checking them off, checking them off. Get the individuals and the resources necessary to do it. Find them. Whose responsibility is it to stand at the change management meeting and say, it's ready? Release management. Because change management is just a rubber stamp. It's all release management that decides whether this release is ready. They stand in that change management meeting and say, we're ready to go. We can go this weekend if you want it, if you got room in the schedule. But we're ready. We're ready to go. And whose responsibility is it to, here comes the hard part, to say to the business, we're not ready. Ouch. I think that's the biggest one. To say there's too much risk if we move forward. It's not ready, there's too much risk. The business, of course, has been establishing all sorts of things that tie in with the dates. Not a good plan. So, before the first release, I need to establish a release policy. A policy which says, here's how we do releases, or here's when we do releases. Or, let's take some real easy stuff. SAP and large software vendors pump out updates all the time. Do you put them in at will when they show up? Or do you package them together? So you do them once a month, or you do them once a quarter. What do you do with Microsoft security updates for Windows? They come out once a month. Do you just go with Microsoft and say, it looks good to me, go baby go? Or do you test them first and repackage them, put them on your own server, push them, or let people pull them off? Release policy. These are all various release policies for easy stuff. Now we need a release policy for some of the hard stuff. In other words, some of you have businesses that have seasonal ups and downs. If you're in retail, it's probably not a good idea to do new releases in December. That's a policy, right? Most of you have a change freeze in December, starting in mid-November, actually, if you're in retail or banking, credit cards. No retail business does anything from November 15th till about the first week in January. No credit card processing does anything but minor changes in that same time frame. A change freeze. Many of you freeze the end of the calendar year to do the books. Pretty normal stuff. It's all release policy. Everything I just said was a release policy. We don't do releases. We don't do changes during that period. Okay, I need to figure out what are the components of a release. What are the release units? Am I going to release each little Microsoft patch? Am I going to pack the thing up and release 30 patches at once? What am I going to do? Microsoft's release policy is to send them out as individuals, but allow you to install them as a group. Even though they scroll by one at a time, you can select all important or urgent updates, and it just goes, right? And that's the release unit. What size is the package of the release? You need a process to do releases, an actual process that says things like, no development, you can't just do this on your own. Infrastructure, you can't do it on your own. We need to talk about it. We need to make some sense out of it. No development, you can no longer throw it over the fence after developer testing. You know what I'm talking about. Developers go, well, looks perfect to me. Change management goes, whoa, never saw that before. What? Has to go in 2 weeks? No way. Yeah. So the idea behind release management is, when does release management get involved in the project? At the beginning. They get involved at the beginning. They're there for every milestone. They're there for QA testing. That's when the release management process earns its stripes, is through the development of the release. Not at the end when we throw it over the fence. The fence goes away. Establish integration with other key disciplines like service design, transition planning, change, software configuration, SDLC, project is a biggie, and governance. How are we going to, once this release is in, how are we going to measure it? How are we going to monitor it? Have you ever been involved in a software project where the software was written beautifully and everything was perfect and it went in and even the in was perfect? Life is good, it's running. And then some manager, director person said something like, how good is it? It's really good. In other words, we didn't put in the measurement, we didn't put in the monitoring. All that now is going to be laid on top, as opposed to being part of the development and part of the release from day one. Now that we're going to go back in almost as another project and develop monitoring and measuring of that release so that we can answer questions and monitor and see how it's doing. Okay. This policy is a big deal. Okay, it's a living document. We know you're going to change things over time. It underpins all the customer release policies as well. It should involve service levels and how that's going to work into release and deployment management. It could be a single document, but more likely it's an umbrella for a bunch of policies. Measuring is key. And key performance indicators so that I can have not a monthly report, but a daily or moment-to-moment dashboard. I need to see trending on the release, how it's doing, how it is after it's in, how it is during the in. Where do we go from it's totally in development, it's totally in production, I'm in no man's land. What we call in ITIL early life support. What's the criteria for going from one to the other? Where do the incidents go when I cross the boundary? If I'm in development, they go to developers. If I'm in early life support, do they go to the service desk? Or do they go to the developers? I don't know. What's your policy? When it's in production, boom, they go to the service desk. So those types of things need to be worked out well in advance, not made up in the last minute or so. Some challenges to keep in mind as I close. All of us have limited staff, but more than the number of staff, each staff has certain skills and others that don't have certain skills and expertise. So it's going to be key that we make sure that we have the staff we need to do the release, we have the third-party suppliers we need to do the release, we have everything before we start. We can get ourselves into some fairly hairy situations in some of this if we don't simply plan what I would consider very basic stuff. Time constraints. The business seems to always need it tomorrow. I mean, in the world of IT, we have a 18-month to 24-month budget process, right? When people say, I need this piece of hardware, we say, no problem, I'll put it in next year's budget. That was what we used to say. That's no longer acceptable. But that's the way we've been grown up. We've grown up thinking. That's not going to work. The business seems to always want it tomorrow, and part of the reason is, A, they're the business. They're salespeople and marketing people and that kind of stuff, who seem to be always last minute. The other reason is the market shifted on them. They didn't see it coming. Suddenly that's like, boom, hit them in the face. Now they need something from us, and they need it tomorrow. It's not always their fault. Scope creep, my favorite. Creativity is a wonderful thing. Really. Innovation is a wonderful thing. And as we define the release, you'd be amazed at how creative everyone gets after we define the release. Right as we've got a very clear, very hard line around what is in this release, creativity enters the process. Scope creep. This is why God invented versions. This is version 1. This idea that you have will be part of version 1.1, which we won't be releasing right now. It's essential that we make that hard line, or we will never get anything in. Culture of distributing the release deployment process across multiple project teams rather than have a centralized discipline. So not like a PMO, but rather everybody does releases the same way. And many of you have organizations that have wide geographic spread. Therefore, the idea is that the process doesn't vary. It's the same no matter what. Limited infrastructure resources for automation. Here's where we start to be able to take advantage of tools that are already existing so that we don't have to write stuff ourselves. And the assumption that software development is release management. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Remember, as I walk off, the goal of release management is do no harm. That's really a business, if you will, almost a business-focused process, a business-focused enterprise, which says, I appreciate that you've got a fancy infrastructure, and I appreciate that you've developed this wonderful software, but we've got this business, and we provide services, and we want them to run. Gotta go. Time's up. Thank you very much.